Hello, hello. Instagram Live, another one. My time's short because I'm going west soon. So, just doing this while I can now. My schedule changed a little bit. But, yeah. Chewing on some of this frankincense gum. You know what I'm saying? Get you some good frankincense gum. Good for your teeth. But the blue or the green frankincense gum is better than the other one. I don't even know if you can. I think the other one might not even be edible. But maybe it is, man. Y'all could just fact check me on that one. Opinion check me on that one. But anyway, Anima Man 4 will be available September 22nd. Really September 21st at midnight, but September 22nd, Anima Man 4 will be available. And I should have Anima Man 5 done by Thanksgiving, or, you know, at the latest it would be the solstice. So, yeah, I'm gonna just wait for a few people, a few more people to get up in here. But I guess it's about right. We good. So this video is about spiritual protection or metaphysical protection. I don't want to sound cliche with even using the word spiritual, because I feel like it's a misnomer to begin with. Because just the difference between anima and animus. The spirit is more so the anima, and the animus is more so the consciousness itself. They work in tandem together, but when people talk about spiritual things, they're talking about things that are within a small portion of the light spectrum, things that are more sensual, not I think metaphysical is just a better word. It's more encompassing than spirit. I feel like spirit is like animals are spirits, you know what I mean? They're programs. Spirits are programs. So spiritual protection might not always be the best word, but I know it's a word that most people will, or a title that most people will identify with when I'm trying to make this point here. So you got all these different types of protection, and I was having a conversation with a woman about this. I feel like I'm just going to basically just go on my discussion that I had with her, because we were talking about having children, and I was just saying, I was like, yo, I don't think there's anything wrong with her, and I don't think there's really anything necessarily wrong with me, and I think it's more so just a spiritual protection thing, and having respect for that. You can do whatever you want to do. Ultimately, you have the will to do whatever you want to do. I'm not going to tell people not to have kids. I'm not one of these people that say the world's overpopulated, so don't have kids, or the world's a bad place. I just feel like it is what it is, and I feel like you need to have your protections in order to embark on an undertaking as grand as child rearing. I feel like you deserve to do your due diligence and prepare yourself and protect yourself and your loved ones as much as possible. And I was just talking to her about my situation, and I feel like a lot of women that are in this lifestyle, or if you can even call it a lifestyle, because it kind of, a culture really is a means of communicating with creation or the creator. So some people say I have a cult following, or people say that this is like the breatharian culture or the vegan culture, but we don't really have a common ground of communication, so it's not really a culture. A culture is a system of communication for communicating with creation itself, with the creator itself. So I just feel like when having a child, you would need to have all of these communication systems established, and then so you're going to have you're going to have a topical or a physical form of security, a physical or like a limbic, like a tribal form of protection, of physical, spiritual protection. Because, this is a spiritual war, or whatever what people want to call it, but the body is the anima, it's spirit itself. So all war is spiritual, physical, kinetic war or metaphysical war. Is, at some level, everything that is consciousness has a spirit. It has a physical element to it. The spirit is really actually the physical. Anything that can be quantified is the spirit, is a spirit. So what I was saying is basically, like, when it comes to this culture or whatever, this ideology, I think that comes with I guess reduction, needing less, eating differently than the norm, I guess you could say, having less matter, less material from the outside as sustenance for your life. That, like, what comes with that ideology, I feel like a lot of good things come from it, but at the same time, I feel like it can also breed a lot of, like, escapism. It can breed a lot of, like, people wanting to reject the physical element or part of experience. So I feel like I'm having experienced a lot of this stuff, as far as, like, going on travel binges, going for years living in isolation, and then living years immersed around people, going back and forth, living in the burbs, living in cities, like I said, living in the countryside, deep isolation for long periods of time, for years at a time. I feel like I kind of got a nice contrast to see the processes. I spent enough time in each way of being to where I saw the different processes. I saw, like, how it becomes this kind of its own escapism. Like, the Tao flows through everything. Even in a city with a bunch of 5G and everything like that, the Tao is flowing indiscriminately through everything. Like, light is shining on a dog's ass, or, like, water will nourish without trying to. It's not, the truth doesn't need you to accept it to be what it is. Like, water doesn't need you to drink it for it to be nourishing. It is what it is. Like, yeah, people live in the cities and they don't acknowledge reality, or the reality that they live on top of, that they superimposed illusion on top of, rather. But that doesn't mean that the reality is not there. It doesn't mean that the Tao isn't governing, that the Tao isn't in control, that the Tao isn't flowing through everything. So I feel like sometimes people try to escape to the countryside. And I do agree, though, that the countryside is the place. I'd rather be in the countryside than in the burbs or the city any day of the week. I never would suggest to anyone, if they're planning their life out, to go live in an apartment or live in the burbs. I think that if you're in those places now, that's fine. And if you really want to really truly experience yourself, I feel like at some point you're going to have to get some land. Because if you live in the burbs, you live in an HOA. You live in a homeowners association. So you basically live in an apartment building that is shaped like a suburban development. You don't really own your home. You really don't control your own residence because it's under an HOA. So when you look into unrestricted land that people can live in to really build their own life, to control their own destiny, their own autonomy, then you can see, like, this real situation that we're in, because it's very difficult compared to restricted land. It's very difficult to find unrestricted land that's in a reasonable price that you can actually live on and work on and grow things on. So a lot of people it's going to take a long process of them researching the land and then taking the steps to, buy the land and spend time on the land, and then gradually transition into living off the land and really realizing their own potential. So I'm not telling people to just drop things and run. I think it's a process. I think obviously the time is ticking and people don't have as much time as they might have had if they started a long time ago. But it is what it is. You know, if you're hearing this message, you probably have an opportunity to find some unrestricted land somewhere and carve out a life for yourself. So with all that said, I feel like when it comes to women that are in this vein of thinking of veganism, raw veganism, breath work, detox, like really in it, you know, I feel like a lot of the times, men too, they want to like totally escape from society. Like they want to totally abandon it all at once. And I feel like it creates a yo-yo. It creates people running away to other countries and really making themselves vulnerable. And then ultimately yo-yoing back to the situation that they were in. And, you know, obviously that's not what we really want to do. You know, you want to have autonomy. You don't want to be at the behest of somebody that runs some type of village, some eco-village somewhere else. You'd like to, you know, unify, create a trust, literally and contractually, to where you can operate on some land with some other people that are of like vibration, and have a like relationship, a relationship in the likeness, a relationship with creation that is in the likeness of yours. So I feel like when it comes to women that come into my radius that feel an attraction or affinity with me, and I see it with other people too, I feel like, you know, I live in a place where I've been alone for a long time. I've been living on top of a mountain for a long time alone. You know, I just had my dogs for periods, you know, long periods. For years I had no electricity. I was just living off solar panels and a generator, and then eventually I got electricity, really just so that I could house family members when they visit. You know, I feel like it was helpful to just have it on, have a pole on. So I feel like a lot of women, like, I become their everything. We become each other's everything in that situation. Like when we totally abandon everything at one time. I mean, I've already gradually worked towards doing it and setting up infrastructure, human infrastructure. I moved to the countryside. I met a bunch of people in that area in my process of doing so. And I created value in my own life, you know, goods and services that I can provide to the world, to where I have an infrastructure there on a human level and on a monetary level, you know, and then so that I could carve out a life, you know. But like when a woman comes into that, I feel like a lot of times, like, we are pretty much just isolated with one another, and I feel like it, you know, we almost corner one another in a sense, and I feel like it moves rapidly because, again, we become everything for one another. Like I'm her lover, her, you know, potential baby dad. I'm fatherly, you know, and then they're all that for me because there's nothing else there. And it's like when you're really thinking about having a kid, you would like to, if you're doing it correctly, you would like, the whole process is going to be in respect to the unification of families and bloodlines. So in doing so, if you have that human infrastructure on a familial or on a kin level, then you're going to have, you know, for me, I was blessed. My mother, I knew her family. You know, I knew, a lot of her family's melanated, so I knew all these melanated people. All my cousins was melanated, my aunts and uncles was melanated peoples. And so they showed me my place because I got to bounce my energy off of them. You know, I got to, like, see my own place. I got to see my strengths and my own weaknesses. I got to see their strengths and their weaknesses and the way we can help each other. And not to say that I did everything perfect or everything happened perfectly. You know what I mean? I still have failures in my life. But I'm just saying, like, it really gave me perspective, you know, and I didn't know how blessed I was because I just grew up in it, you know, and I just thought that this is life. You know, you got cousins and family that love you and people that take care, you know, of each other. And they might not have, they might have addictions. They might not have a lot of money, they might not have a lot of things, but you have each other. And I feel like that's a different kind of wealth. And I just look at it like, man, if I would have known my father's family, I only knew one grandparent. Like, if I'd have known all my grandparents, if I'd have known my father's family, if we would have been able to come together and like the bloodlines could congregate, and you have this mass of cousins and aunts and uncles that all intermingle and they work together. They might have businesses together and things like that across bloodlines. Then you're really becoming self-contained, and you're really not. You are your own government. You don't really need a government at that point. So I just feel like, as far as looking at the things that I could offer a child, I was like, man, based on my positioning, I have the money. Like, it's not like I'm the wealthiest guy on earth. I'm not saying I'm just like I'm balling out of control, but I have the money. I can have several children. You know what I mean? But that's just on a sense of like a carnal sense. Like, I could provide physical sustenance for them and a roof over their head, keep them warm or cold or whatever, cool or whatever. That on that level, I could do that stuff. Like, I could have several children. That's not a thing. But like that's one level of security. That's one level of spiritual protection. Like you got, obviously, you want to keep your blood in your body. You got your physical protection. You know what I mean? Like, you want to have parents that actually keep you in a place where you're not under physical attack, and then you want to not be under emotional attack or mental abuse, right? And then you want to have like security with your family around you, but you on the contrasting end of that, you want to have mental strength and emotional strength, and then also physical strength with you and your cousins and your brothers and sisters. You push each other physically too to be better and stronger. So, and then you create like a societal strength, because your brothers, they go make friends, and then you be friends with their friends, and then you meet your friends' friends, and then everybody's unifying under a common ground of strength, instead of like kind of what it is now. Like, I think most people unified under like just socioeconomic status. Like, you just play with the kids in this neighborhood because this is all you can work with. It's not like everybody moved to this area because they were like, yo, we just want to be as strong as possible, and this is the place where we can do it. So it's a totally different premise for connection and synchronization there. And I just feel like, I'm explaining this to her, and I feel like when you be honest like this, people, they really understand it. I feel like, at first, I got an emotional response out of her when I'm like, I don't know if we're going to ever have kids, because based on this dynamic, the situation and where I'm at right now, this is not enough security. There's not enough spiritual protection. We're going to make ourselves vulnerable for trauma, and not just us. We're going to witness trauma, but the child is going to be really experiencing the trauma. And so, and then who knows what that will do, that ripple effect, as far as the child inflicting trauma on other people, making themselves, and then other people witness that trauma. So it just spreads, like trauma is like a virus. So like, I just was, expressing this to her. I'm just like, man, the things that I can offer is like, I can offer like basic carnal needs, monetary needs, and I have societal connections, I guess, at some level, but it really has to be more practical than that. It has to really be like a physical proximity, a close physical proximity involved, as far as like protection, like for us to bounce this energy and our potential off of one another, to really witness it. Like a boxer don't really know how strong they are until they punch something or somebody. Like, you need to see that recoil. You need to see that response. If you're just punching the wind all day, you kind of will never know your own strength. And so we need to bounce that energy off of one another. And I'm just like, ideally, you would like to have a common land, this is speaking ideally, common land, common color, common language, or communication system with creation or the creator, You know, a phenotype helps. Common phenotype would people be like a general look, because there's plenty of black people that don't look like each other. You know, it's plenty, like, you know, you go to India, it's really black people that don't look like really black people from East Africa, and they don't look like really black people from West Africa, and they don't look like really black people from Australia maybe, or Indonesia, and they're all really dark. So how, you know, it's not going to just be just color. It's going to be some sort of, you know, obvious like phonetic or phenotype bond that where you see your face and my face more easily. It makes it to where, you know, that's why people tell the religious stories that they tell. That's why you have white Jesus or whatever. Because if people can see a common face and they can identify that strength with their own face, then it empowers them. So if you're around other people that look like you that are successful, it just empowers you. It challenges you more to be, you know, to continue to reach your potential, you know, because there's no excuse if they can do it. So, and you also need like a common relationship with the creator, you know, like as far as the likeness, you know, you need to identify like this is the mark of the creator. This is the mark of creation, creativity, love, truth, reality, you know, like having not a grasp, but acknowledging that, having a common understanding, I guess, or common acceptance of what that is, that likeness of creator and creation. That's necessary for security, for protection, or spiritual protection, metaphysical protection. Like, because I'm looking at like, what can I offer besides money? For a long time, I was like really worried about money, like as far as having kids. Like, I'm like, damn, you know, I really need to have like crazy amounts of money. I'm just like, man, the more I know, the more that it compensates for the money. If I really have practical knowledge, you know, the money's not really a thing. And it's not like I don't know how to appreciate money, you know, gain value. You know what I mean? Appreciation of money is like amplification or accruing value. Accruing the, you know, value in money. I know how to do that. You know what I mean? I've seen the formula for that. So that's like, plenty of people I think will just stop there and become like one-trick ponies. Like, and then you look at it from the outside looking in, and people will think that person is successful. Like, we look at Michael Jordan and we think he's successful. You know, we really look at him like, oh man, it's this guy, multi-billionaire, you know what I mean? He's successful. I look at it like, yeah, his success is concentrated in one area of life. You know, at some level he got in touch with his will and his breath from playing basketball and stuff. But look at what he abandoned, the other areas of himself that he abandoned. Look at his relationship with his children. Look at his relationship with the mother of his children. Look at how he, you know, he wasn't really there for them because he just focused on competition so much. And now he marries somebody that is his child's age, you know, like years later, you know, and he obviously not in the best health if you look at him. So like, we're looking at it that way. It's like, man, how are you this wealthy and this successful in the eyes of the world, but your health is suffering? You're obviously missing protection. There's protection that's being missed somewhere. There's knowledge that has not been activated somewhere within you. And parasites are counting on that. You know? And so, you know, you can look at the greatest before him. You look at Magic Johnson. Like, Magic Johnson got them rings and everything. But on a personal level, not even the HIV thing, the fact that his son is gay. I feel like that has everything to do with not having the knowledge to know how to breed and to know how to take care of yourself when you are breeding and to know how to take care of a child, a son. Things was missed, man, and that is a different kind of poverty. You know, it's a different kind of poverty. It's when you have, like, money can't buy that. Like, he can't spend money to ungay his kid. At that point, he already made decisions that brought him to that point. To where now the greatest basketball player, you know, arguably of all time, you know, got a son that doesn't really reflect him, you know. And I'm not even trying to bash gay people. I'm just saying, like, this is not random. You know what I mean? Like, if you're under certain stress and a woman's under certain stress at different points in different trimesters, you're gonna get different symptoms. homosexuality is a symptom. You know what I mean? It's like pride is the ultimate disease, you know what I mean? And trauma creates the pride, right? So like, or pride creates trauma. They kind of beget each other. So like, you got this disease that spread of pride or whatever, and it has very different, varying different symptoms. Like some people are going to be greedy with their pride. Some people are going to be lustful with their pride. Some people are going to go so far with their pride that they're going to mechanically be so in love with their physical reflection or idea of themselves that they become homosexual. That's just a deep level of pride. And we all experience in different degrees of pride. You know, like somebody might be wrathful, you know, they might be, you know, vengeful. Some people might be envious. Some people might be hoarders, like I said. They might be, all the 7 sins are just pride. So that's this mind virus that creates a bunch of different symptoms, a huge range of symptoms. But it's really only one disease, and it's pride. And that is possession. You know what I mean? Pride is possession. This is emotional possession. You know, people are, and again, emotions are essentially vehicles or programs themselves. Anger, all of that. Every emotion that you experience is a program itself. And you summon that program on a chemical level by the way you treat your body and the way that you identify with thoughts. And that's all a chemical reaction as well. The thoughts that you think and the reason you're even thinking them. All of that's chemical. So you're experiencing pride in different areas of your life. You know what I mean? Plenty of people, you know, anger is pride. All of that is pride. And so this infection is where all the possession starts. And that's where all the trauma starts, and that's where your spiritual protection breaks down, where you become vulnerable. Pride is what breaks down your spiritual protection. So when you're looking at creating a child, like if you do it, like if people call their kids their pride and joy, if you look at it like, yo man, I'm gonna create this child, or I'm gonna jointly create, I'm gonna align, because creation is alignment. I'm gonna align to produce a body for a being to come into, for a being to inhabit. And I'm gonna partake as a co-creator or whatever, or as just unifying with the creator or creation. And if you're doing it from a prideful stance, if you're just doing it from a lustful place, if it's just all sensual based, then it doesn't matter if you spend all the energy in the world that you have trying to protect them. You cannot protect them from their own destiny, in a sense. Like, they're going to have their own challenges and their own decision making points and processes. You can't protect them from that. And the more that you do that, the more that you make them weaker, and then it just creates a bigger snowball down the line for the trauma to come through and really hit them, you know. And so if you was to have a child from a prideful place, and then something happens to that child because you did it in a vulnerable way, then you're gonna feel worse than if you never had a child. You know what I mean? There's plenty of people out here that, you know, got drunk and had kids, or was doing drugs and had kids, and then their kids ended up getting murdered or something in the streets because they weren't there with them, because they was out being an addict, because they're so proud and so ashamed of themselves, because pride turns to shame, and then that's the cycle, the pride, shame, addiction cycle. And then the child ends up being in a vulnerable space, and then now you feel even worse. Now you hate yourself even more. And then that's more of an extreme account of it, I guess, but it happens all the time. And it happens on lower levels, I guess, too, like where the bloodline will completely veer into the wrong direction. Or somebody have a prideful kid. They have a kid just because of like, oh man, we look good together, so the kid will look a certain way. They'll attract certain things on a physical level. So you know, if you have generations of that, or even one generation of that, you're doing things from a subconscious level. The body is the subconscious. Like when you're focused on the identification with the body instead of like the identification of what created the body and having a relationship with that or being that, then you're going to set the body up for trauma. So, you know, you have one child out of lust and sensuality. You know, 10 generations down the line, the bloodline will be so broken down because you have lust on top of lust, and because that's the ingredients that created them. And they're being raised in a life with a broken template, broken armor to protect them. So it's all sanctioned behavior to have children out of societal status or out of lust. So that all that does is perpetuate that. So you get 10 generations down the line, the facial structure has broken down. The skin might look different. The hair looks different. You might be broke, or you might have a lot of money, but you have no other types of protection. And people just not seeing it in a holistic way, you know what I mean? Like, that's how I look at it. Like, I'm going to work out for the rest of my life. I'm going to cycle blood through my muscles, my tissue, keep my bone density strong, you know, but blood is basically consciousness. So do I want my consciousness completely lodged in my muscle tissue, or do I want to like evenly distribute it throughout my whole being, the way I, you know, circulate the light? Because you know, you're going to make yourself attract certain things if you prepare your body in certain ways. If you prepare your body for war, you're going to attract war. You know, it's like it's inevitable. If you prepare your body for heaven, you're going to experience that. For reality, heaven is just fucking reality. But yeah, and you will get exhausted if you have a child out of pride, and then you try to funnel a bunch of money into taking care of them. You try to position them at the best schools or whatever, all trying to protect them from themselves and their own potential and their own decision-making abilities. You're doing all of that, and at that point, you know, you're keeping them from themselves. They're not really experiencing themselves. So trauma is inevitable either way. They're going to feel betrayed, and that'll be trauma, you know, which will probably lead to physical trauma, or physical trauma will just happen, and you just have to deal with that. And it's just going to be exhausting, you know what I mean? And me personally, like, I learned a lot from dogs. You know, I know a lot of people might frown on the whole dog thing, especially melanated people. Some melanated people do understand what you can learn from dogs, but I know a lot of them don't really particularly have any value for dogs, you know what I mean? From my experience, you know, as far as like learning from them, you know what I mean? I feel like a lot of them don't look to dogs to learn from, but I think you can learn from anything. So like, when it comes to dogs, I feel like you can see out of a litter what they take different space. You know, one dog's going to be a loner, one dog's going to be hyperactive and reactive, one dog, you know, is just going to be super obedient, you know, one dog's just going to be a terror. And they occupy like different spaces of the litter, of the room. They like occupy different areas of the room and different energy, like signatures. And so like, from my experience with dogs, like the dog that needs you the most, you need that dog the most because you need to learn why it needs you. And I feel like dogs with great potential, you know, a lot of strength and stuff, like they're vulnerable because, I mean, they're so strong that strength becomes a weakness because it could end up, you know, ending them. And so you see the same thing in people. Like, you know, from my experience with a dog that I had that died, Like, I saw he needed so much protection, and my whole life I'm doing everything to try to keep him from himself, from getting possessed. Not from himself. I was himself. I was essentially the nucleus of this atom. And the dogs is kind of like my electrons and protons in a sense. So I'm like the nucleus, and the dog, he's so strong. He got all this potential. He could be a great dog, but he needs to be reminded of himself, of his nucleus. You know what I mean? Until he realizes himself enough to where he can be his own nucleus. And it's the same thing with children. Like, the dog would get so possessed by his emotions. He would get so worked up that I have to reel him back and, make him, remind him of, like, look, man, you're so in your emotions, snap out of it. And you see this with people all the time, you know what I mean? Because it's not animal. I mean, it's an animal thing. It's not a dog. It's not a species thing. Animated is animal. The body is animated. The body is animal. So if you look at any animal, you can see the characteristics of animal behavior, sensual behavior, carnal drives. You can see that in a dog. And you can see it in people, obviously. And so then there's those flashes where I see the dog getting better and growing, and it's like, a dog with a great potential to hurt itself with a lot of strength or something, just like a person has a lot of power, they have a greater window of vulnerability. So you have to really be there for them as they mature until they can be their own nucleus, so they can really be themselves. Until they settle into that. They really calm down and be themselves, and they're not identifying with emotions. So it's the same thing with people. So like, you see a dog like that, and like, as it starts to calm down and you start to see it get it, like, you can see like the difference between when it's being vacant, when it's just vacant and open for possession, emotional possession, spiritual possession, energetic possession, what have you, parasite, spirit program possession, what have you, however you want to look at it. The parasite is using the program to harvest the energy, keep you angry, keep you lusting, keep you prideful and desiring, to where your energy gets drained off, and then eventually the body's going to crash. And then on a physical level, the parasite eats the body physically. So I've seen this in the dog. I've seen different times where he was vacant, and then I've seen other times where, like, oh, you recognize yourself through me, so you're being yourself, and I don't really have to worry about you. Like, you are yourself right now. And usually that would come from training or working the dog out to where the energy isn't just stagnant. It's not a bunch of energy that's just going nowhere. It's actually being used for a purpose. When the energy not being used for a purpose, then it's going to attract parasites. It's just inevitable. The dog's going to get worked up emotionally because it's all pent up with energy. It doesn't know what to do. It has no outlet to create or to express itself. And it's the same thing with people. You see the same thing with people. It doesn't really matter. You know what I mean? So like, I felt like it just, if you look at it on an atomic level, it's just a high vulnerability through excitement, emotional excitement, whether it be anxiety, anger, depression. It's all really emotional. It's excitement of some sort. Some sort of energy is coming in and exciting the body. And this, on an atomic level, when an atom is excited with energy, when photons are coming into an atom, electrons get pushed out from the center and they can be ejected. As energy comes in, the electrons go out. And so that's more so like storage, welcoming energy in. But when the electrons come in because light is being emitted, being flashed. So like, if you're expressing yourself, flashing light, releasing energy, then the electrons come closer to the nucleus. And because, it's like they gravitate towards the nucleus more when the energy's going out. And when the energy's coming in, the electrons go further out. So it's the same thing with people. When you are looking at it, like, who's the nucleus? Who is the self? If you're in a group of people, like, somebody has to be the self, or you're all just free radicals. You're all just cancer cells at that point. But if there's a nucleus there, then you all have an opportunity to realize yourself, realize symbiosis, and growth. So like you can realize fusion, production of light, production of energy. So when you have an atom or a nucleus, like a person, and you're taking in energy, you're pushing people out. It's like you're taking in light, you're pushing people out. You take in an ancestor, somebody in their life is gonna leave. They're already on their way out. So it's like they're getting pushed out as the light comes in. It's like a closed system. You're an atom. You and your family, somebody might be electrons, somebody might be protons, somebody might be neutrons, but it's an expression of chemistry. You're just a macro expression of the same thing. So energy comes in, the photons, the light comes in, the electrons get excited, they get pushed out, and I feel like you see it with people all the time. What's up, Nat? You see it with people all the time. The energy comes in, the money might come in, the children might come in, something comes in, and that pushes people out. That purges people out, that pushes things out. And then when you're giving that money out, you're giving that energy out, then people come in. You express yourself. You spending money, you paying for things. You're a light at that point. Your light is being transmitted, so then you attract. You're pulling the electrons closer in. And so you see it all the time with people. For me, on a personal level, with the dog, is that it's just happened multiple times with dogs. Dogs taught me so much with that. Like, I had 2 dogs years ago, 2 girl dogs, and I was the nucleus, and they revolved around me. And then I had a female woman come into my life that was toxic and consumed my attention. I gave up my attention to this toxic person. So that energy, that toxic energy was coming in, which is just really just energy that is it's more radical. It's not, the structure of the energy isn't correct. So I have to process the energy and make it correct. You know what I mean? If I want to be myself. And so that just becomes exhausting over time. So the energy came in, the person comes into my life. The dogs are getting pushed out now from the center of the nucleus. So then the dogs start fighting because they're not getting the energy not circulating through them because there's a blockage now. Because this energy is coming in, they're getting pushed out. And so same thing happened recently though. Earlier in the year when my dog died, I had 2 women come into my life. One was someone that I had been with before and I wasn't really planning on being with her. She was just coming to help me out on my land. And the other one I was, on and off with. And so I had both of them with me at the same time. And the dogs that it's like the nucleus was me. I had 3 dogs and I had 2 women. And we all in the vehicle. And so the 2 dogs, I guess you could look, the 2 dogs that survived, you could look at them as like protons. They stayed closer to the center. The electrons are on the outside. My one dog that died, he was more on the outside. He was more of an electron. So like, when the energy came in, when the people came into my life, the dogs that knew themselves more, that didn't need me as much, they went into themselves. When chaos was happening, when stress was happening, they went into themselves, which protected them. They stayed closer to the nucleus. They stayed closer to me. The electron dog, when the energy of chaos came in, he got beside himself. He reacted. And so he was ejected. And so then he died. You know what I mean? So like, it's all chemistry. Everything that's ever happening is chemistry on a micro and macro level. So, it just looked like, if you look at it that way, then I feel like you can understand any relationship and you can understand how to protect things properly. Like, if you're looking at like, what's up, Nat? if you're looking at like maintaining your autonomy, then you just have to have respect for your energy, your real, understanding your real capacity. And the only way that you will understand your capacity is if you push yourself to realize your potential on a physical level, to see how strong you could be physically, to see how strong you could be as far as your will and your metaphysical strength. It's all going to work hand in hand. You have to push yourself, or allow the breath to push you rather, so that you can realize your potential. And if you don't do that, then you never realize your capacity. So then you don't realize when you need help. And so then you take on more than you should. And then that leaves you vulnerable. And then anybody else that's associated with you is now vulnerable. So, man, when we talk about like absorption of light on an atomic level, welcoming in light, really, really being breatharian, or what's the word? Autotrophic. I don't even like saying breatharian. It's autotrophic. You know what I mean? Like you're really, in order to do that, like, because chlorophyll is the most similar. It's the most similar to melanin. That we have, as far as like that we can look observably. So like, you look at chlorophyll. It's a magnesium ion surrounded by a bunch of hydrogen molecules, or hydrogen atoms rather, and then around that is a shell. It's called porphyra. That shell is carbon and hydrocarbons. You could call that melanin. It's porphyra means purple. You know what I mean? And it's the same thing. Like a porphyra is like when we're talking about blood. In the blood, a porphyra is heme, where you get the word hemoglobin. So like hemoglobin is what transfers prana, or oxygen, whatever, into the blood or throughout the system. The hemoglobin is taking that oxygen that you breathe in and transferring it all throughout the system to feed the cells, right? It's bringing that air in and ushering it all around. That's the hemoglobin's job. The heme is the porphyra, which is, the darkness. The darkness is bringing in the light, disseminating the light throughout the whole system. And it's the same thing with chlorophyll. So, you have the heme in the blood of a human. We breathe, and we take in prana, or we produce prana rather. And through that reaction, that fusion process within us, energy is created. The hydrogen fusion happens inside the body. The body's 10% hydrogen. So when you're doing breath work, you're holding the breath, and so that pressure makes those hydrogen molecules collide with one another. This is fusion. This is nuclear fusion. So like when the protons of multiple hydrogen atoms collide, because they're moving at such a speed, because the pressure is so strong, that they overcome the repulsion. Because if you have two positives, two protons, they repel each other, right? But if it's such a strong pressure, the protons will ram into each other, collide, they make a new nucleus, and that hydrogen turns into helium. And through that process of hydrogen turning into helium, the mass is reduced by a portion. And when that mass is reduced, that mass is converted into light or energy or heat. So we are creating a nuclear reactor through this process of expanding our diaphragm, creating that pressure on the breath, on the lungs, on that system, to where the hydrogen molecules bounce off each other. That creates that fusion that emits light. Then the hemoglobin takes that light, distributes it throughout the body, the darkness, attracts the light, distributes it throughout the body, nourishes the system. And that's how atoms power themselves. Atoms do not eat other atoms. Through fusion, through unity, they create new light. And it's the same thing with people. And that's why I'm going to get into it in a second. But so if you look at chlorophyll, It's a magnesium ion in the middle, and then multiple nitrogen atoms surrounding it, surrounded by hydrocarbons and carbon, surrounded by melanin, basically, right? And it has a tail to it. So that magnesium ion attracts photons. And as the photons come in, the electrons are ejected. And so the energy comes in, the light comes. This is how photosynthesis happens. It's just like an inhale. The light is attracted by the magnesium, the photons coming into the magnesium. This transfers the electrons out through the tail of the chlorophyll structure. And this is how the light is converted into energy, or to a sugar, or a carbon, rather, because it's carbohydrate. Carbon hydration. Hydrogen, carbon, melanin, hydrogen, bonds. And again, so you're saying like this hydrogen is now colliding to make the light. The light is now being attached to the carbon. This is creating energy or heat. And then now it's a carbohydrate. Now it's feeding the plant. It's feeding the body. The air is feeding the body on an atomic level. This is how autotrophic living is conducted on an atomic level. You know what I mean? People need to know. That was my folly before, is that I knew innately, but I didn't know how to translate it into a language, because it was the communication system that was lacking. So I didn't know what I knew that things were missing, different parts of my communication, and I would reach different points in fasting and detoxing and lifestyle alteration, and I would stumble because I didn't have the communication system, because I didn't see the correlation. I didn't see how it was all one thing, you know, and this is part of the process, you know what I mean, at least for me, you know. And so when you're looking at creating families, you know, you're ushering in light, right? So people be like, man, you say black people should be, or dark people should be with other dark people or whatever, and lighter people should be with each other until they gather their light over generations and they graft to the grapevine that way. Isn't that going to create inbreeding? Don't you say, Taylor, that when a mammal inbreeds, it creates albinism? And it's true. Any mammal that inbreeds becomes white. Look at white gorillas. Anything. You can even look at snakes. You can look at deers, albino deer. You look at anything that is albino. Something happened to its habitat to where it can only breed with a small group of counterparts, and that broke the template down to where you have mutations in the chromosomes. And you know, for humans, it's chromosome 15 and 16 that's determining skin color. So if you have mutation in those areas, you're gonna have different shades of skin. You know what I mean? But everybody still has the same makeup of chromosomes, or we wouldn't be able to breed together. And people that have extra chromosomes typically aren't in a position to breed. Typically. And if you're like a person that has Down syndrome, I mean, what, you're going to breed with another person that has Down syndrome and break the template down even more? It's not really the best decision, right? Or if you're a healthy person, would you really be with someone that has Downs? That would naturally weed itself out. Just because life is chemistry, and chemistry is constantly finding a solution to perpetuate itself. So when it comes to two supposedly black people or melanated people coming together to not inbreed, they have to be themselves. They have to fully embody their body, fully inhabit their body, rather, to where they can create a new thing. Because it's new light being ushered in. It's not the same old tired light being cycled that you inherited from whoever and whichever ancestors back in the day decided to stay in alignment. And now you've inherited this melanin, and you know, some people just waste it. You know what I mean? Some people just let it be dormant their whole life. But if you fully activate it, Then you connect with someone else. They fully activate. Now you're ushering in new light, new cosmic energy. Because I'm going to get into it in a second. It's such a large topic. But when you're bringing in new light, because you have like the creation of energy, and then the light refracts or whatever, it creates these 8 rays of light. Like if you talk about like Hua Hu Ching, the Hua Hu Ching is saying like there's 8 energy rays that can protect you and everything. And so yeah, it's like it's the same thing. It's like you got light that gets turned into all these different forms of light, like gamma rays, infrared, whatever, all those different types of light that are byproducts of light refracting off of itself. So if you're ushering in new light through this process of atomic fusion or nuclear fusion, because that's what stars do. What powers stars? Hydrogen colliding with itself to create helium, which converts the mass into energy, and that's what creates the shine. That's all stars are powered by that process. Hydrogen fusion. And all people, I shouldn't say all people, souls and graphs that are realizing themselves in their position, they have the capability of conducting conscious hydrogen fusion. So when people are doing that, when they have hydrogen, they are more towards the autotrophic lifestyle and they unify. They are stars coming together, just like 2 hydrogen atoms crashing into each other to create light, to form new light. So you have this fusion, you're having sex, which is a collision in a sense. You're having this resonance, this friction of sex, right? Of banging, right? That is bringing in or creating more light. The photons come into the system, and so now you're having more energy being harvested, and then you release, you create through ejaculation. The light comes through the male first and into the feminine, right? So the man has to have it together. He has to have his things together because he's the initiator of creation. A woman can have 1 million orgasms. It will never initiate a baby. If a man comes one time, the potential for a baby is there. So 2 people that are souls or stars, because it's a solar star, they come together. They form a new body, a new star, what have you. And that is a new being. That's the procession of a soul. That's how a soul comes to be. That's through alignment with the Creator and the formula of creation and moving in accord with that. Then now you have the protection of the Creator, because the Creator was the facilitator of that creation. You're aligning, and that oneness is realized with the Creator. And so now your endeavor, your creative endeavor, is now protected by God because it's not separate from God, or Creator rather, what have you. So now you created a totally new star. So we've, fast forward to where we are now, where people are just constantly recycling the same souls over and over again, creating like residual creations, spirit programs, chimeric, partially animal, partially human, partially original man creations. All of that is like residual creation. That's not actually creation. That is reduction. That is fragmentation. Actual creation is what I just said. Real nuclear fusion, to where you align with God and a soul proceeds, comes through the portal. And so it is something totally new. And there hasn't been anything new here in a long time, because we're in an infinite loop of people doing the same bullshit over and over again. Same shit. People don't know themselves. They ignorantly breed, and then their kids ignorantly breed, and then they just go right on into oblivion. And then the shit resets every 1,000 years. And then we just restart and do the same old mess. People get high on the hog and they get pride and proud. And then the pride creates the fall. And then we go through another 1,000 years of darkness. And we keep doing the same bullshit over and over again. Because there's no unity between light and dark. So, when you have a mass of people bringing in new souls, then you have a bunch of new timelines, a bunch of new potential, a bunch of new inventions. Because the body itself is an invention. It's the greatest creation. It's the greatest act of art. It's the greatest art in the world. It's the greatest mechanism of chemistry. It's the greatest geometry ever in existence. So that is an invention itself. So if you created something, a new soul, or you aligned with that creation, the new inventions on a human level, that's obviously going to take place to where it enhances life rapidly. And then now it's like the 100th monkey thing. As soon as somebody gets the formula, one person, everybody else starts to get the formula. So now because if you have one soul, they're going to attract another likeness. Because it was done right. So there's going to be somebody somewhere, if they're not already in your camp, doing the same thing, creating a baby. And it's just like the Wu-Tang shit. Like, your seed, marry my seed. You know what I mean? And then life proceeds forward with new souls, fresh new light. You know what I mean? Because I know people like, how's it not inbreeding if it's only black people breeding with black people? And it's like, yo, if you have more light, you really have a lot more biodiversity. You don't need injections of albinism to somehow make a new thing. That's an act of reduction. That only reduces your situation. But if you were, even pale people, they need to get with someone that has similar in chemical affinity with them and gradually make the steps forward and set the trajectory. Once the trajectory is set up, there's no time for consciousness. Once you set that up, you've already created your kid that created a kid that created a kid that created a kid. And you already got the potential to see down the line. You have a dream, what people call dreams, and look down the line and you can see like, oh man, I'm in my great-great-great-great-grandkid's body, and now I'm more in the likeness of the creator on a physical level. Just because of what I did generations ago where I was in the likeness of the creator, you know, as much as I possibly could, to set up a trajectory to where now I'm one with the creator on all levels, from metaphysical to physical. So you create something new, and that new thing creates a new thing, and that new thing creates a new thing. And it's a small alteration. It doesn't have to be some grand change, but it's going to be a alteration so that the core stays the same. The core, the eternity part, stays the same. And then the shell, because the electrons, you know what I mean, you can eject electrons. You can gain electrons, lose electrons, and that's ionization. I'm going to get into that in a second. So, like, the shell can change, you know what I mean? Like, you just want to keep that continuity of the core there and keep that relationship with that core strong. Core strength. That's real strength. From your knees to your nipples. If you're strong in those areas, that's real strength. Your limbs are only as strong as your hips and abs and lower back. So when you maintain that core, the outside might change, the hair might change a little bit, the facial structure might change a little bit, but the core of the face is going to stay the same. It's still going to be a signature there, so that you can look down the line and you wake up in a dream within a dream within a dream, which is like lifetimes down the line, and you can look in the mirror in that dream and you can still see yourself, and so you can retain the dream more. Because a lot of times when people look in the mirror in dreams, they don't recognize themselves because it might be who they really are, and they're so afraid of themselves that they just black out the dream. Or they're just so far away from their likeness that they black out the dream. So it's just like cognitive dissonance. Like, I don't see it. So like, that's really what I always wanted to say when people, I feel like when I have that conversation with people, because they're like, aren't you saying that, you know, two likeness breed over time that creates albinos, and then the albinos breed that creates more recessive traits, and then that creates, spirit program that creates demons, fallen angels. That's what that creates over time, generation after generation of breaking down the template. That's what happens when you inbreed. But if you are yourself and they are themselves, then you're yourself together, and then you usher in that's refreshment. The whole process is refreshing. So you create something new, and it's like a ship. It's a relationship. As you have a baby, that's a ship itself, and it relates to you. It's your relationship, and you're sending your consciousness down the line. You become the dormant consciousness as the years go on. As you take breaths, or as they take breaths, you have less breaths ahead of you. And then eventually they have children, and then they fall to the back, and then eventually you start, you go back to the front of the pack, and then as a chain of eternity, and you move forward instead of a loop. Instead of this same incarnation cycle of the same bullshit over and over again. So, and that's another thing I was going to say about electrons. Like, when something has the same amount of electrons, they have the same valence. So, like the word or the city of Valencia, that it means strength. Valence means strength or competence, like capacity. So, if you have the same strength, you have a covalent bond because you have the same amount of electrons. You match. So now you have the same energy level. You have the same level of competence. You can be together. You're what do they say in Christianity? When you're of the same cloth. Yoked, equally yoked. You're equally yoked when you have a equal balance, equal strength. So there's families in the periodic table. You know what I mean? You got eight families in the periodic table. You got 7 periods in the periodic table. You got 94 elements naturally in the periodic table. Right? And it starts with hydrogen. Again, that's where light starts. Hydrogen colliding with itself. When the protons collide with themselves, that creates light. That's what creates helium. And then from helium, you create everything. You're creating all the bond. All the bonds are now possible. Once you've created hydrogen and helium, now every other bond or every other element can now be produced through various collisions. So now all the other 92 of the 94 now are created after hydrogen and helium. So you got 7 periods in the periodic table. And this is also just the pattern of creation of life too, and of time. Foxy, come here. Foxy. So you got like the gold age, the iron age, silver, bronze, all of that. You got these different families that come up in the periodic table. From the alkali family to your alkali metals, to the transitional metals and the post-transitional metals, to noble gases and noble metals. You got all these families that get created, and it's just like people. You got the original people that get created, and then they make fusions that create the next family, and then they make fusions that create the next family, and then you have these transitional elements and the post-transitional elements, which are derivatives that are just extensions of that family. And then they create, that creates all 8 families of the periodic table. So when you're talking about health in the body itself, we're talking about balance. As far as like when magnesium, because I was talking about magnesium being the center of chlorophyll, which is essentially like the same thing as melanin, the structure. Magnesium's at the center, right? And that's why magnesium's at the center of a lot of the body's functions. When you don't have magnesium, the body is going to try to use other elements that have the same valence as magnesium to try to compensate for the lack of magnesium.
And this is what creates pretty much all the neurological problems in the body and all the physical problems in the body. So you can have something that it's equal, but it has equal strength, but the structure at the core, the strength on the outside, the valence, I forget the word, electrobasticity, I forget, but it's the word for your electrical strength. That's your valence. That's the outer orbit of the nucleus. But then you have the protons and neutrons that's the inner orbit of the nucleus. So that the electrons on the outside might match. People might look the same on the outside to you. You might match like that. But the core has to be the same, or it will create dysfunction. There has to be some type of affinity there at the core. That's why one element is different from the other element. That's what creates an atomic number. Because you can have the same amount of electrons, but if the protons are different, the proton count is different, then you're going to have a different element. And so there's not going to be an atomic bond. It's going to be an ionic bond. And an ionic bond, or you have an atomic bond that is polar. So that would be codependency. It won't be a stable it won't be a stable atomic bond. It'll be just codependency. You know, you might look the same on the outside, whatever, or you got similar traits on the inside too, but you're not really mastering yourself. You're not really evolving. So now it's just a polar atomic bond. Most people today, they don't even have that. They're in ionic bonds, like metals and non-metals. You know, that's what an ionic bond is. Salt is an ionic bond. You know, it's two elements. One is a metal, one's not a metal. And just like in the Bible, it says, I believe in Daniel, it says, iron and clay shall not mix. And the statement was basically saying, like, Israel is not going to breed, the people of Israel, the original people, God's people, they can intermingle with clay all they want, but they'll always be iron. And if they try to cross with the clay, there's going to be destruction. Because there's a lack of respect there. And so you're not respecting chemistry. You're not respecting the fact that this is an ionic bond. And chemistry is constantly creating a solution for balance. So that's why, you know, salt, like I said, is an ionic bond. It absorbs. It's constantly seeking to fulfill. It's because it's not a complete match. So it's constantly seeking. It's constantly trying to draw something to it to make it a complete bond. The relationship is not an equally yoked relationship. I know, Fox. I'm almost done, girl. So, you know, a lot of people out here, they're using beryllium and other elements that have the same electron count as magnesium. The body's just coping and using that to try to live, try to survive, you know. But and then once they do that, you see it on an external level. You see people bonding with people that they shouldn't be bonding with out of survival because they haven't activated the knowledge. So I'm going to get into the 7 days of creation in Genesis. There's a book called The Periodic Table in the Bible by Shibu Pothen. Shibupothen. Shibu Pothen. He's a chemist, and he just breaks down the relationship between the 7 days of creation and the periodic table and how they're the same thing. How the Bible is really a book of chemistry, but you can't separate chemistry from geometry. Theology, chemistry, geometry, what else? All of it is one thing. There's no separation. So I was saying, like, what I was talking about, light, right? Packets of light are photons. That's the subatomic particle, right? They say it has no mass, right? But somehow it's matter with no mass, right? Because it's ether. It's dark matter, rather. So you have, which is some people call it melanin, right? It's melanin in a different state. You know, you got melanin in some states, and we're going to call that carbon, right? But all chemistry is really based in melanin. That's the common denominator in all of it. So photons are subatomic particles, right? They're not atoms. You know, they're not ions. They're just the smallest forms of light that you can have that can be converted into energy. Come on, Foxy, chill, man. They can be converted into energy in a system in various ways. So when you have light emission, like I was saying, you have electrons entering towards the center of the nucleus. And when you have light absorption, the electron is being emitted and ejected. So, like I was saying, the first day of creation, you know, you have pretty much God separating, he just said, let there be light, right? Separating light and dark, or just producing the perception of light and darkness. Not really a separation thing. So, there was darkness. God said, let there be light. That's hydrogen fusion. That's day one, right? So then you get the waters above separated from the waters below. And that's why you have, on the second day, because you have if you look at the periodic table, you have the second family. They produce, the second family on each side, they produce the atmosphere. So you have the waters above. The firmament in Hebrew means like thin metals. It just means like thin metals. So like we're talking about like lithium. Because lithium is the finest metal. That's like really the Trinity. It's hydrogen, helium, and lithium. And the combination of the three is what creates all other life, essentially. So lithium is the thin metal. It's the lightest metal. It's the thin metal which makes up the firmament. So the light comes through, or whatever. That that creates this next period of creation where that elicits this response to where the waters separate. The light makes the water separate from above and below. So then that's why you have in the Bible as well, you also have the flood story where it's 40 days and 40 nights of rain, because it's saying that the firmament, the water from above came down. So because the firmament got more thin, the water from above gets rained down for 40 days and 40 nights. And that's why you have 40 elements, 40 transitional elements from atmosphere to everything that would be needed for the third day of creation. Because you're going from, first day is just light, the second day you're creating atmosphere basically, and then the third day you have water being separated from land. So that transition, between that transition is 40 elements. So light was coming through and it couldn't really fully penetrate until the firmament was thinned out more. And then you have these 40 elements that get created through that process, these 40 transitional elements that get created through the process of the firmament thinning, what have you, whatever metaphor you want to relate that to. And then so you have your third day of creation, which is God separating land from earth, and then plants, vegetation starts to take root. So you have DNA being created at that point. And DNA is just protein and sugar, really. So, so it's like carbon and sugar. You know what I mean? That's what a lot of DNA is made of. The backbone of DNA. So the third day if you look at the third day or the third period in the periodic table, which is after the transitional metals, you're getting carbon. because you're getting Earth at that point. So everything that's a carbon-based organism needs DNA. So, the only way that DNA is possible to exist, to make a plant, is for carbon's existence to happen. So that's why carbon is in the third period on the periodic table. And the third day of creation is God separating land from water and making plants, which is just, the beginning of DNA. So then you have the fourth day, the sun, the moon, and the stars are created, right? Which again debunks this theory that God somehow made the earth in 7 days, that like 7 weekdays, like we know it now. In Hebrew, it's called a yom. A yom just means a period. It doesn't mean a day. And if the sun doesn't exist until the fourth day, and the sun is how we determine what a day is, it's impossible that the days of creation are actually 24 hours. The sun isn't even made, so how can you even measure time without the sun? How can you even measure a day, like a human day? So 7 days are really 7 yoms, 7 periods, or 7 phases. 7 periods on the periodic table is 7 yoms. So the sun and the moon and the stars are created on the fourth day. And this is basically the build-up for spirits, because you have souls that are solar, right? They're stars, and all the planets are really just wandering stars, really. So then you have the moon, which makes all the lunar spirits, because demon or daemon means deity of the moon. So that is all of the souls, all of the solar-based spirits, or all of the solar-based beings, rather, being produced, and all of the lunar-based spirits being produced at this point. Because you can't just be like, all right, I'm going to make human bodies now. It's a process of going from less dense into dense. So it's going from metaphysical to physical. So it's like, all right, we're going to make the metaphysical template first. We have to make the stars. You know what I mean? Because the structure of people, is essentially their zodiacal makeup, as far as their animal, because zodiac means zoo circle, zodiac or zoo circle. So the body, which is animated, is an expression of the zodiac. So you can't have a physical body without the stars, moon, and the sun existing. That all has to exist first before you can create physical expressions of those metaphysical bodies. So after the fourth day, animals are made, right? Livestock or whatever you want to call it. Animals, you know what I mean? Cow or everything. Buffalo, deer, all that is supposedly made, right? So the DNA has reached another level, right? And then, that's the fifth day. Sorry. The fifth day, animals are made. And then the sixth day, finally, God makes man. And the word for man in Hebrew is Adam, or Adam. Right? Because man is an atomic creature. Atoms power themselves. Original man is autotrophic. They're not heterotrophic creatures. They don't have to they don't have to eat other things light in order to sustain themselves. They create light. They are light. Through hydrogen fusion, their atoms power themselves, and they create light. That's pretty much a soul, a star in physical form, or personified, anthropomorphized, whatever. So, man is created on the sixth day, right? And then on the seventh day, God supposedly rests, right? But the seventh day is really, because you have 94 natural elements in the periodic table. After those 94, I think they're at like 128 or something now. I don't really count the ones after the 94. I don't really count them the same. They exist, but they only exist because man made them. They don't occur in nature. So God leaves this seventh day open and blank because it's like, I'm giving man, which I made on the sixth day, I'm giving man my likeness and will to be able to create elements as I have. So the seventh day is just basically like when Mendeleev made the periodic table, he made it and left a bunch of open spaces because he knew there was elements he didn't yet find. He didn't know them yet, but he knew they existed because mathematically he knew they had to exist based on the ones he found. He was like, well, if I found these and they have this structure, there has to be metals and elements between them that exist. I just haven't found them yet, so I'm going to leave these spaces open. So it's the same thing, like God created the natural elements of the phenomenal world. And then God leaves this blank space open the seventh day by giving man, an extension of God, original man, giving God this will and likeness to create elements. It's like, okay, now go and create now. Now be fruitful and multiply light. You now have my ability now. You're now endowed with this ability to create. And so now you see man has created dozens more elements. You know what I mean? So the last thing I wanted to say is, because breath is the connection to the Creator, is the means of all communication. All talking is just loud breathing. Thinking is just quiet breathing, in a sense. So you have plasma, and then you have gas, then you have liquids, and then you have solids. And that's the nature of the physical world. So plasma is just ionized gas. So when you add an electron to an atom, you create negative ions. That creates anions. You know what I mean? And if there's a loss of an electron, that atom becomes a cation. It becomes a positive ion. Positive ions are, really the source of all cancer. Negative ions, you get those from water crashing. Because again, the energy coming in, when you're adding an electron, when the electron's coming in, you have the energy coming in, the electron goes out. When the energy's going out, the electron comes in. So when you have a loss of an electron, the energy's coming in, and that's creating a positive ion. When you add an electron, the energy's shit. No, my bad. When an electron comes in, because when the energy comes in, the electron goes out, and when the energy goes out, the electron comes in. So when you're adding an electron, the energy had to have been going out. Then there's a release at that point of light. So that's an atom becoming an anion. And when an electron is lost, then the atom becomes a cation. So the breath, again, like I was saying, is ionized gas, which is plasma. And there's a plasma existence, or metaphysical existence, that exists that's like the subtle, or what would be the word? Subliminal, the sublime existence is this plasma existence that already exists, like as plasma beings. Then through the process of deionization, the plasma becomes gas. The gas can become a liquid. the liquid becomes a solid. And this is the pattern of creation. This is the pattern. This is how a being goes from being metaphysical to physical. That's the process. The breath is plasma. There's plasma in the blood. Plasma is generated in the liver. That's another tool in the blood used to expel waste from the system. So the plasma comes in, the breath comes in, the waste goes out, and the consciousness comes in, because the breath and consciousness are tied together. They're one, basically. You can't really separate them. And it's an abstract thing. That's abstract life. It's like, it's inanimate, really. Plasma living is more so inanimate. Animated living is quantified. It's not abstract. It's concrete. So that's why I say, like, life is animated ego death, and death is inanimate life. Inanimate life is just being in your plasma form. And every night when you go to sleep, you return to that plasma identification, and then you can traverse from one body, because a body is just like a reel or a set of memories, essentially, a chain of DNA. You can go as a plasma being, you go from one body to another body, and they each have memories in them, and then we call those parallel lives, what have you. But you need to establish the connection with the plasma part of you, and that's done through the breath. Once that's established, then you have everlasting life. You need to know the mechanics of it. You need to know the specifics, the particulars of this process, because that's knowing yourself, learning yourself, so that you know what you're doing. You're not just, trying to haphazardly to consciously come in and out of form. And that's really the process. Every night you dream, you practice that, realizing your plasma state through your breath. And then you come back down through the gaseous state as the breath hits the body, hits the liquid, because the body's mostly liquid, and which hits the bones, or the more dense parts of the body. And then the body is enlivened. The plasma is the transformer. The body is what is being transformed through the breath. That's the mechanism of transformation. That's the mechanism of transfiguration, what we also call alchemy. So I think that's it, man. Anima Man 4 is going to be out September 22nd. It'll be $10. The other Anima Man series 1 through 3 is $25 for those 3. But then all my other books, I got 43 other books from a wide range of topics, man. From Tantra to breathwork to fasting to all of that. That's $25 for those 43. And it comes with 5 audiobooks. And I'm $50 per half hour of consultation. And then $50 per half hour of breathwork instruction. So you can also follow me on Patreon, because that's where this video is going to be. It'll be on patreon.com/Taylor Durden. And it's $4 to join my Patreon. It's not a lot of money. It's $13 to get the upper tier, where I just go through my life story and how I came to be. So $4 for the Patreon, patreon.com/Taylor Durden. $50 for all of my books. $10 for Anima Man 4, which comes out September 22nd. $50 for a half hour consultation. $50 for a half hour breathwork instruction. So I'm going to go into the questions real quick, and then I'm going to call it a day, because this is my last day in Jersey. It'll be on Patreon. Yeah, it is Cation, not Canyon. Everybody's still breatharian. We're all born breatharian, man. Do you have any advice for healing the lungs after quitting smoking? Astragalus root, marshmallow root. I'm chewing frankincense gum. It's the real original gum. Book recommendations: The Hua Hu Ching, The Further Teachings of Lao Tzu, Metu Neter, Volume 1 through 7. It's a good place to start. So, yeah, it'll be on. It's not. I'm not putting it on my YouTube. I'm putting it on Patreon. So, my current intake: mango banana smoothie in the early part of the day after work, after breath work. So you have breath work, stretch. I usually hoop or work out, and then I have a mango banana smoothie, and then I have some tea with my herbs, and then in the evening I have an Amazing Grass protein smoothie with coconut milk and frozen bananas. The solution for smoking: astragalus root and marshmallow root. So that's it. How to get rid of candida: wormwood, diatomaceous earth, black walnut, sarsaparilla, yellow dock root, and don't have bad food combinations, man. Don't mix sugar with fat. I don't have any certain sun sign preferences or any astrological preferences. I mean, I would look at it more like what complements the both of us as a couple. Info on O negative and O positive. One is lunar, which is the O negative, and O positives are solar. Breath work and detox is how you remember dreams. California turning into shit. Where you headed to? I already got some land in the south. I'm gonna get another lot in the south. And I was thinking about getting another lot like somewhere in the northern Midwest, like South Dakota or something, for the summers. I don't know, but I already got a place in the south. I'm gonna ride out California until it's completely dead, though. The A positive bloodline is a fragment. It's an extension or a fragment from an oversoul. You can get ivermectin from Amazon.com. All right, y'all.